Let's bring in our panel. Matt Lewis is a senior contributor at the Daily Caller. Juan Williams is a Fox News political analyst and columnist for The Hill. Dave Catanese is a senior political reporter at U.S. News and World Report. And Katie Mcfarland is a Fox News national security analyst. Welcome to you all. And Katie, I'll start with you because, of course, national security is something that came up again and again tonight. There were some differences on how these candidates said they would deal with ISIS, with Syrian refugees, a lot of hot topics.
You know, the interesting thing was not so much the difference between the candidates. It was Hillary separating herself from President Obama. For example, America must lead. Well, he's leading from behind. That's a difference. ISIS, she kept talking about ISIS, not ISIL. President Obama insists on talking about ISIL. She said we're going to defeat, not contain ISIS. He talked about containing ISIS. She said we're going to have special forces, we're going to have intelligence forces, but not combat forces. Obama's got those forces on the ground, but he won't admit to it. She talked about Egypt. She said, I didn't want to topple Mubarak. And then finally she said, I don't want any Iranian troops there. Now, why is she doing this? I think part of it is to reflect the fact that the country is not comfortable with President Obama's policy. But I think that's also an inoculation. If there is a black swan event, if there is a mass casualty attack in the next year, she's now put herself in a position of, that's Obama over there, I'm over here.
Yeah, and David, she also talked about Syria in that respect, too, that she said, I was advocating for us arming the moderates. Again, it seemed to be her emphasis on saying, I was trying to do things differently than the way they've turned out and what this administration did.
I think so, but the Republicans are all over this statement of her saying we are where we need to be. They're taking that one statement and they're saying, gotcha, this is what we're going to use against you.
Yeah, let me read this just so people know what she said. She was talking about ISIS and Syria and dealing with this. She said, we are finally where we need to be. We have a strategy and a commitment to go after ISIS, which is a danger to us as well as the region. And we finally had this UN Security Council resolution talking about we've got the military situation going on, we've got the diplomatic situation going on.
And the president has ramped up the bombing there. I think the interesting thing is going to be, what are the Republicans saying that they're going to do differently? And do they want to have the debate next November, no matter who the Republican is, that they're willing to send troops, tens of thousands of troops, or even hundreds of troops of American boots on the ground against her? I think she is comfortable in that argument. They're hitting her tonight on this, but I think Republicans have to be careful about where the country is on intervening and on putting boots on the ground back into Iraq and possibly into Syria.
Yeah, Juan, that was something we heard a lot about tonight, too, because Bernie Sanders kept saying, no way, no troops on the ground. Katie, you point out the parsing she did, saying special ops is different than putting a bunch of combat troops on the ground. She said ISIL, or I think she was calling it ISIS, as you said. Governor O'Malley was saying ISIL, but the other two sounded like they were saying ISIS. But she said that these troops would be the biggest target for ISIS. It would be a recruiting tool for them to have a bunch of U.S. combat troops there on the ground. So it's something that got discussed tonight for sure.
Oh, without a doubt. And that basically echoes what President Obama was saying to a group of columnists that came into the White House this week, that he sees that the large American presence on the ground, in fact, as provocative, as stirring up antagonism towards the United States and not necessarily solving the issues on the ground. I think the larger point here for what she had to say was the general election. And I had that sense throughout the entire debate that she was less debating with Sanders or O'Malley. And by the way, they see her as too hawkish. In other words, they were saying, you're too aggressive on this front. So that gives you something of the Democratic temperature, Shannon, that they do not, unlike the Republican debate where they're talking about carpet bombing and killing families. Here you see Hillary Clinton as the most aggressive among the Democrats in terms of taking the fight to ISIS.
Well, and Matt, Bernie Sanders was saying to that effect, he kept saying she's so anxious for toppling regimes and regime change, and he really tried to pin her down on that.
He did. That came up 2 or 3 times, and I have to say, I saw a real similarity between the Republican debate the other night and the Democratic debate. And obviously the races are different. Hillary Clinton is by far the front runner. On the Republican side, it's in flux. But what you have this similar dynamic where you have an establishment candidates who are much more hawkish, much more interested in regime change, maybe, or at least possibly. And then you have these populist candidates who are anti-establishment, who are running. Ted Cruz sounded sort of like Bernie Sanders, and Hillary Clinton's almost like the Marco Rubio candidate. So it's interesting that this dynamic transcends the political parties. This is out there in the public right now, and this is a huge debate. in terms of national security, should we be supporting dictators and allowing them to stay in power, or should we try to topple them?